I expected better from a Deathworlder. The Zerlon announcer's voice crackled across the arena as Captain Margot Kane stepped into the light. Thousands of alien eyes glared down at her from the towering stands, their anticipation a tangible force. She didn't flinch. Instead, she adjusted the grip on her combat gauntlets, her expression betraying nothing but cold determination. The alien crowd erupted into jeers and laughter. To them, she was a curiosity, a fragile human from an unremarkable planet, stepping into a bloodsport designed for the galaxy's most lethal warriors. They didn't understand what Earth truly meant, not yet. Combatant Kane, the announcer sneered, drawing out her name as if it were a joke. You face Vrogar, the immortal, undefeated champion of the Zerlon arena. Do you wish to surrender now, or shall we entertain your misguided bravery? Margot glanced across the massive arena at her opponent. Vrogar was a nightmare incarnate, 10 feet tall, his muscular, reptilian frame armored with thick, overlapping scales. A glowing energy halberd hummed ominously in his clawed grip. Around his neck hung the trophies of his past kills, teeth, claws, and bones from other fallen warriors. Cute jewelry, Margot said, cracking her neck as she stepped into the center. Her voice carried through the arena, amplified by the translator embedded in her gear. The crowd fell silent for a moment, shocked by her audacity. Vrogar growled, his forked tongue flicking out. Your courage will amuse me before I break you, human. The arena's klaxons roared to life, signaling the start of the match. A shimmering force field encased the combatants, isolating them from the crowd. The terrain began to shift under their feet, morphing into a jagged, volcanic landscape dotted with bubbling magma pits and unstable rock formations. Margot didn't wait for Vrogar to make the first move. She sprinted forward, a blur of motion. The gravity was heavier than Earth's, but she trained for this. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. Vrogar roared and swung his energy halberd in a wide arc, aiming to cleave her in two. Margot dropped into a slide, the blade narrowly missing her head as she skidded across the molten rock. She rolled to her feet and lashed out with her gauntlets, aiming for the exposed joints in his armor. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena. Vrogar staggered, momentarily stunned, before countering with a backhanded swipe that sent her flying. She crashed into a boulder, the wind knocked out of her, but her body armor absorbed most of the force. The crowd erupted in cheers for Vrogar, their confidence in him renewed. You're too slow, Margot muttered under her breath as she stood, a smirk forming on her lips. She flexed her hands, and the gauntlets whirred to life, emitting a low, ominous hum. The advanced tech wasn't alien, it was Earth-made, designed for adaptability and precision. Vrogar charged, his massive frame barreling toward her like a living tank. Margot waited, her muscles coiled like a spring. At the last second, she leaped, vaulting over him and delivering a sharp kick to the back of his knee. He stumbled forward, his balance momentarily compromised. You rely too much on your size, she taunted, circling him like a predator. Big mistake. Vrogar roared in frustration, his attacks growing more erratic. Margot exploited every opening, using her agility and cunning to stay one step ahead. She wasn't just fighting a larger opponent, she was dismantling his confidence, piece by piece. Finally, with a calculated strike, she landed a blow to the side of his head, sending him crashing to the ground. The crowd fell into a stunned silence. Margot stood over him, breathing heavily but victorious. She raised her gauntlet, signaling the kill, then turned to the announcer. Is this what you call a champion? She asked, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The crowd erupted, not in jeers, but in awe. They'd underestimated her. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The arena floor shifted beneath Margot's boots, the jagged volcanic terrain dissolving into a flat expanse of shimmering metal. A low hum filled the air as countless projectors around the arena activated, generating a new battlefield. Margot glanced up, her eyes narrowing as the holographic terrain materialized around her, a dense jungle of towering, twisted trees with foliage so thick it blocked out the artificial sun. The jungle wasn't real, but its dangers certainly were. Every simulated blade of grass, every venomous creature lurking in the undergrowth, was designed to kill. Above her, the crowd erupted into wild cheers as the announcer's voice boomed. Combatant Kane now faces her next challenge, the Seraph-class combat drone swarm. Margot didn't flinch as dozens of sleek, insectoid drones shimmered into view, their metallic bodies glinting like liquid mercury. Each was equipped with plasma cutters, adaptive cloaking tech, and a hive-mind intelligence that made them a coordinated, lethal force. The swarm hovered in eerie silence, watching her with glowing red optics. Then, as one, they attacked. Margot spun into action, her enhanced reflexes kicking in. The first drone dove at her, its plasma cutters sizzling through the air, but she sidestepped and lashed out with her gauntlet. The kinetic shockwave obliterated the drone, sending shards of metal scattering across the jungle floor. Two more swooped down, attacking from opposite sides. Margot ducked, their plasma beams narrowly missing her. She rolled to her feet and grabbed a nearby tree branch, snapping it off and hurling it like a spear. The improvised weapon pierced one drone's core, sending it crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks. Impressive, the announcer drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. But how long can you survive against an enemy that adapts to your every move? As if on cue, the remaining drones shimmered, their cloaking systems activating. They vanished into the jungle, leaving Margot alone in an eerie silence. She pressed her back against a tree, her breathing steady. Her eyes scanned the dense foliage, searching for any sign of movement. The swarm's strategy was clear. They weren't just machines, they were hunters. "All right, let's see how smart you really are," Margot muttered, pulling a small device from her belt. It was a compact EMP charge, standard issue for Earth's special forces. She armed the device and hurled it into the jungle, counting under her breath. 3, 2, 1. A blinding pulse of light erupted, and the jungle came alive with the screeches of malfunctioning drones. Several shimmered back into visibility, their cloaking fields disrupted. Margot didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, her gauntlets crackling with energy as she tore through the disabled machines, reducing them to piles of scrap. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining drones adjusted their tactics. They circled her from above, their plasma cutters firing in synchronized bursts. Margot dodged and weaved, the beams scorching the ground around her. One clipped her shoulder, burning through her armor and searing her skin. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain. "Your persistence is admirable," the announcer mocked. "But surely even a Deathworlder must know when they're outmatched." Margot ignored him. She wasn't outmatched, not yet. She scanned the jungle, her mind racing. The drones were fast and coordinated, but they had a critical flaw: they relied on their hive mind. If she could disrupt their network, she could take them down. Her eyes landed on a central node, hidden among the trees, a pulsating orb of light that emitted the faint hum of wireless transmissions. It was the swarm's control hub. "Gotcha," she whispered, sprinting toward it. The drones reacted immediately, converging on her position. Margot dodged their attacks, using the trees for cover. She reached the node and slammed her gauntlet into it with all her strength. The kinetic shockwave shattered the device, sending a ripple through the swarm. One by one, the drones faltered and crashed to the ground, their connection severed. The jungle dissolved around her, replaced by the cold, metallic floor of the arena. The crowd was silent for a moment, then erupted into thunderous applause. Margot stood in the center of the chaos, battered but victorious. She looked up at the announcer's booth, her voice cold and defiant. "Outmatched? Not even close." Above her, the aliens watching from the stands were no longer laughing. For the first time, they looked at her with something new: fear. "A Deathworlder isn't a warrior," the Zerlon historian declared to the audience, his voice projecting from the announcer's booth. "They're a survivor. That's why they're dangerous." The audience quieted, eager for the historian's insight. Around the galaxy, Earth was an anomaly, a planet classified as a death world due to its hostile environment, unpredictable ecosystems, and the relentless evolution of its species. Few had ever met a human, and even fewer understood the reason why these fragile, unassuming beings thrived on such a planet. The historian gestured to the arena, where Margot Kane stood motionless, staring at her next challenge. Her face was grim, her body battered but unbroken. Around her, the arena shifted once again, morphing into a new simulation, an endless, frozen wasteland where the wind howled like a beast and visibility was nearly zero. What they don't tell you, the historian continued, is that humans aren't just built to survive their own world. They adapt. They innovate. And worst of all, they endure. The crowd's eyes shifted back to the arena as Margot's next opponent emerged from the blizzard. It was unlike anything she had faced before, a hulking, quadrupedal predator with sleek, black fur that shimmered in the cold light. Its 6 glowing eyes darted in every direction, and its elongated limbs ended in razor-sharp claws. But its most terrifying feature was its psionic aura, a telepathic field designed to probe its prey's mind, exposing their fears and weaknesses. The creature hissed, and Margot felt its presence warming into her thoughts. Memories she had buried long ago began to surface, the screams of her squad during a failed mission on Titan, the sight of her younger brother's face as he begged her to stay instead of enlisting, and the crushing loneliness of her years as a mercenary. Her breathing quickened. The predator circled her, its eyes glowing brighter as it fed on her fear. "There's no shame in failure," the historian said, his tone sympathetic, as if Margot's defeat was inevitable. "Even the strongest Deathworlder has limits." But Margot wasn't listening to him. She clenched her fists, her gauntlets crackling with suppressed energy. The memories were painful, yes, but they didn't break her. They reminded her of something far more important. Every scar, every loss, had made her stronger. "Is this it?" she muttered, her voice cutting through the icy wind. She locked eyes with the creature, her expression hardening. "This is what you've got? Cheap parlor tricks?" The predator growled, its telepathic assault intensifying. The images in her mind grew sharper, more vivid. The screams of her squad became deafening, the guilt over her brother more suffocating. But Margot didn't flinch. "Let me tell you something about humans," she said, stepping forward. "We don't run from pain. We learn to live with it." The predator hesitated, its movements faltering. For the first time, it seemed unsure of its prey. "That's right," Margot said, her voice rising. "You've got nothing on me. You're just another problem to solve." She raised her gauntlet and slammed it into the frozen ground. The kinetic shockwave cracked the ice, sending fissures racing toward the predator. It stumbled, momentarily disoriented, and that was all the opening she needed. Margot charged, her boots crunching against the ice. The predator lashed out with its claws, but she dodged with precision, closing the distance between them. With a single, devastating punch, she struck the creature's head, shattering its psionic aura and sending it sprawling. The crowd erupted in chaos, their disbelief palpable. Margot stood over the predator, her breath visible in the freezing air. She could feel the eyes of thousands of aliens on her, their perception of her shifting. "Your turn," she said, glaring up at the announcer's booth. "What's next?" In the stands, the Zerlon historians fell silent, his earlier confidence replaced with unease. The audience wasn't cheering anymore. They were whispering. Speculating. Deathworlders weren't supposed to be unbeatable. But this human had faced every trial and refused to break. And for the first time, the galaxy began to wonder if they had underestimated Earth entirely. The Zerlon Council chamber was abuzz with whispers and heated debates. High above the arena, hidden from public view, alien dignitaries and warlords from across the galaxy watched the spectacle unfold. They weren't spectators, they were strategists, calculating the implications of every move Margot Kane made. "This human is a problem," rumbled the thrall, a hulking insectoid delegate whose mandibles clicked with agitation. "She's dismantling our champions one by one. If she wins again, Earth's reputation as a death world will spread like wildfire." "And what do you propose?" hissed Venaro, a serpentine diplomat with scales that shimmered like oil. "That we let her humiliate us? The arena is sacred. To interfere would be wise," interrupted a Zerlon general, his voice cold and measured. "She's not just a fighter, she's a symbol. Every victory she claims is a threat to our authority. We cannot allow her to leave the arena alive." A murmur of agreement swept through the chamber. Treachery wasn't the Zerlon way, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Down in the arena, Margot Kane adjusted her gauntlets as the announcer's voice echoed around her. For her next challenge, the human will face not one, but 3 opponents. A display of teamwork against an unpredictable enemy. Surely, even a Deathworlder cannot hope to overcome these odds. The crowd roared in approval, their excitement masking the undercurrent of unease. They sensed the stakes had changed. This wasn't just another fight, it was an assassination. The arena shifted once more, transforming into a vast desert with towering dunes and blistering heat. 3 figures materialized on the opposite side of the field, each representing a different species and fighting style. The first was a hulking brute from the Keothan clans, its 4 muscular arms wielding heavy war hammers that could crush bone with a single swing. Beside it stood a lithe, feline predator from the Nisha Pride worlds, its claws tipped with neurotoxins. The third was a Zerlon cyborg, its sleek, metallic body bristling with advanced weaponry and energy shields. Margot sized them up, her face expressionless. 3 against 1. Seems fair, she muttered to herself, rolling her shoulders. The klaxon blared, signaling the start of the match. The Keothan charged first, roaring as it swung its hammers in devastating arcs. Margot ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding each strike. The ground trembled under the force of the blows, sending plumes of sand into the air. Behind her, the Nisha predator pounced, its claws aiming for her back. Margot anticipated the attack, dropping to the ground and kicking up a cloud of sand. The predator recoiled, momentarily blinded, and she used the distraction to pivot, delivering a crushing blow to its side. But the cyborg was already moving, its energy cannons locking onto her position. Margot darted behind a dune as plasma bolts scorched the sand around her. The heat was suffocating, the air shimmering with rising waves, but Margot's mind remained sharp. She knew she couldn't take them all head-on. She needed to turn their strengths against each other. As the Keothan lumbered toward her, she baited it into swinging one of its hammers with reckless force. She sidestepped, and the hammer smashed into the cyborg, disrupting its energy shield. Sparks flew as the cyborg staggered, its systems momentarily exposed. Margot didn't hesitate. She charged the cyborg, delivering a precise strike to its control core. The machine collapsed, its glowing optics dimming. The Keothan roared in frustration, but before it could react, the Nisha predator leaped onto its back, mistaking the chaos for an opportunity to assert dominance. The 2 alien warriors turned on each other, their alliance dissolving into chaos. Margot watched from a distance, catching her breath. "Let them tear each other apart," she murmured. Moments later, the Keothan stood victorious over the Nisha, but it was badly wounded, its movements sluggish. Margot closed the distance with lethal efficiency, delivering a final blow that dropped the towering brute to its knees. The arena fell silent as she stood over her fallen opponents. The once boisterous crowd was now a sea of murmurs and unease. This wasn't a victory, they realized, it was a statement. Above the arena, the Zerlon Council watched in stunned silence. "She's dismantling more than our champions," Ithral said grimly. "She's dismantling the very idea of our superiority." As Margot walked toward the center of the arena, she looked up at the announcer's booth, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "If this is the best you've got, you should be embarrassed. Send someone who's worth my time, or come down here yourselves." The crowd erupted in chaos, a mixture of awe, fear, and disbelief. Margot Kane had not only survived another match, she had humiliated the galaxy's best warriors and called out their leaders. And for the first time, the Zerlon Council began to understand the real threat of a Deathworlder. "The human has proven her worth," the Zerlon announcer boomed, though his voice carried a tinge of unease. "But now, she will face the pinnacle of Zerlon might. Ladies and sentients, behold our reigning champion, Zarek the Sovereign." The arena's atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy with anticipation, the cheers and jeers fading into a tense murmur. Even the most bloodthirsty spectators fell silent as Zarek emerged from the shadows, his towering form casting a long, menacing silhouette across the arena floor. Margot squinted, her instincts immediately on high alert. Zarek wasn't just a warrior, he was a monstrosity. A biomechanical hybrid, his massive frame fused with advanced Zerlon technology. Metallic armor covered his body, seamlessly integrated with living tissue. His arms bristled with weapons, plasma cannons, retractable blades, and coiling energy whips that crackled with electricity. His head was crowned with glowing red optics, and his voice reverberated like grinding metal. "Human," Zarek growled, his voice low and guttural. "You've entertained us long enough. Now, you'll face extinction." The arena's terrain began to shift once more, morphing into a chaotic death trap. Jagged cliffs rose from a roiling sea of molten lava, and platforms floated precariously above the churning inferno. Wind howled through the battlefield, threatening to knock any misstep into the deadly abyss. Margot tightened the straps on her gauntlets, her jaw set. "Extinction, huh," she muttered. "You wouldn't be the first to try." The klaxon blared. Zarek moved faster than something his size should have been able to. His plasma cannons fired a volley of shots that seared through the air, forcing Margot to dive behind a jagged outcrop of rock. The heat from the molten lava below was suffocating, but she didn't have time to hesitate. Zarek's energy whip lashed out, carving a glowing trench through the rock and nearly cleaving her cover in half. Margot rolled to her feet, sprinting across a narrow platform as Zarek pursued her. She reached the edge of the platform and leaped to the next one, narrowly avoiding a plasma blast that obliterated the ground where she'd been standing. "Run all you want," Zarek taunted, his voice echoing across the battlefield. "You can't win." Margot smirked, ducking behind another outcrop to catch her breath. "That's what they all say." She steadied the battlefield, her mind racing. Zarek was powerful, but his sheer size made him less agile. The platforms were unstable, the terrain unpredictable. If she could outmaneuver him, she might stand a chance. Zarek leaped to her platform, the impact causing it to tilt dangerously. Margot stumbled but caught herself, narrowly avoiding a swing from his energy whip. She countered with a strike from her gauntlet, but his armor absorbed the blow, leaving him unscathed. "Pathetic," Zarek sneered, swatting her aside like a fly. Margot hit the ground hard, pain flaring through her ribs. She rolled to avoid his next attack, but the margin for error was shrinking. The crowd roared as Zarek advanced, confident in his inevitable victory. Then, Margot spotted it, a glowing power core embedded in Zarek's chest, faintly pulsing with energy. It was shielded, but if she could overload it, she might be able to disable him. Margot scrambled to her feet, dodging another plasma blast. "All right, big guy," she muttered. "Let's see how well you dance." She darted between platforms, drawing Zarek after her. She deliberately chose the most unstable ones, forcing him to navigate the precarious terrain. His bulk caused the platforms to tilt and collapse, but he continued his relentless pursuit. Finally, she reached a wide, solid platform near the center of the arena. She stopped, turning to face him. "Come on, Zarek. Show me what you've got." He roared and charged, his weapons blazing. At the last second, Margot activated the grappling line on her gauntlet, launching herself into the air. She landed on his back, clinging to the ridges of his armor as he thrashed and roared in fury. "Get off me, insect," he bellowed, but she was already moving. She climbed toward his chest, dodging his flailing arms. Her gauntlet hummed with energy as she reached the power core. "This is for every time someone underestimated me," she growled, slamming her gauntlet into the core. The impact sent a shockwave rippling through Zarek's body, and sparks erupted from his armor. He staggered, his systems faltering. Margot jumped clear as his massive frame collapsed, the glow fading from his optics. The crowd erupted into stunned silence. Margot stood over Zarek's lifeless form, breathing heavily. She looked up at the announcer's booth, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Next time, send someone who's worth my time." The silence broke into deafening cheers, but in the shadows of the Zerlon Council chamber, the dignitaries were not celebrating. They watched her with a mix of fear and resentment. Margot Kane had done more than win a fight, she had shattered their illusion of invincibility. And they couldn't let her leave alive. The arena was in chaos. Cheers erupted from the stands, mingling with murmurs of disbelief and whispers of fear. Margot Kane stood at the center of it all, her gauntlet still crackling with residual energy as the towering corpse of Zarek the Sovereign lay crumpled at her feet. She was battered, bruised, and bloodied, but alive. For a moment, the spectacle of her victory seemed frozen in time. Then, the announcer's voice cut through the noise, laced with forced enthusiasm. Astonishing! Truly a feat for the ages. The Deathworlder stands triumphant, defeating even our greatest champion. Margot tilted her head, her sharp gaze fixed on the announcer's booth. She knew insincerity when she heard it. They weren't praising her, they were stalling. She tapped a button on her gauntlet, bringing up a holographic overlay of the arena's energy fields. As expected, the exit barriers remained active. She wasn't going anywhere. In the shadowy chamber above the arena, the Zerlon Council erupted into furious debate. This cannot continue. Ithral snarled, slamming his clawed hand on the table. She's humiliated us. If we let her walk out of here, Earth's reputation will soar, and our dominion will falter. And what do you suggest? Hissed Venaro, her serpentine eyes narrowing. If we execute her outright, the crowd will revolt. She's become a symbol. We don't need to kill her openly, the Zerlon general interjected, his voice calm and cold. We activate Protocol Delta. The arena itself will finish her off. The others hesitated. Protocol Delta was a last resort failsafe, designed to erase any combatant and leave no witnesses. Do it, Ithral growled. Back in the arena, the ground beneath Margot's feet rumbled ominously. She braced herself as the arena began to transform again, but this time, something was different. The terrain didn't shift into another biome. Instead, the entire structure started to collapse. Massive cracks appeared in the arena walls, and molten lava began to pour into the battlefield. The floating platforms disintegrated, leaving jagged, unstable footholds. The force fields surrounding the arena flickered, then turned inward, creating a dome of energy that began to shrink. The crowd erupted into panic, rushing for the exits. Margot narrowed her eyes, her heart pounding. This wasn't another fight, it was an execution. Nice try, she muttered, scanning the crumbling battlefield for a way out. She spotted a control tower at the far end of the arena, its spire still intact despite the chaos. If she could reach it, she might be able to disable the energy dome. But the path was treacherous, lava surged between the platforms, and falling debris rained from above. She took off at a sprint, her instincts sharp and her body running on pure adrenaline. A massive chunk of rock crashed behind her, sending her sprawling. She rolled to her feet, narrowly avoiding a jet of lava that erupted where she had been moments before. The tower loomed closer, but the path ahead was collapsing. She activated her grappling line, firing it at a piece of exposed scaffolding. It latched on, and she swung across the gap, landing hard on the next platform. Come on, Kane, she muttered, her breath ragged. Almost there. She reached the tower and climbed its exterior, her gauntlet sparking as she gripped the heated metal. At the top, she found the control console, a labyrinth of alien symbols and interfaces. She didn't have time to decipher it. Instead, she ripped open the panel, exposing the power core. Let's see how you like a hard reset, she growled, slamming her gauntlet into the core. A surge of energy coursed through the console, and the shrinking dome of energy flickered before collapsing entirely. The crowd, now evaluated, roared from the safety of the exits as the barriers fell. Margot stood atop the tower, battered but triumphant, as the arena crumbled into ruin around her. Later, in the evacuation chambers, Margot was approached by a Zerlon emissary. The alien's demeanor was tense, its multifaceted eyes glinting with a mixture of fear and respect. You've proven yourself more than worthy, human, it said. Earth will no longer be overlooked. But know this, your defiance has earned you powerful enemies. Margot smirked, her eyes glinting with the fierce determination of a survivor. Enemies? That's just another word for target practice. As she turned to leave, another figure stepped forward, a tall, cloaked alien with features unlike any species she'd encountered before. It spoke in a deep, resonant voice. You've caught the attention of powers far greater than the Zerlon Council, Margot Kane. Prepare yourself. Your real challenge is only beginning. Margot raised an eyebrow but didn't reply. She simply walked past the alien, leaving the crumbling arena behind her. Earth's reputation was cemented, and her legend was just beginning. In the vastness of the galaxy, the name Deathworlder now carried a weight that would never be ignored again.